Until recently, I was pretty damn sure that feminism stood for equal rights and protection of women. And under those criteria, I would call myself a feminist.
However, there is a certain group of feminists, some of them active here on YouTube, who seem to think that you're not really a feminist unless you subscribe to their particular values.
Which include opposing pornography, stripping, the legalization of prostitution, and anything else that is part of the sex industry.
According to them, in order to be a real feminist, you must believe that in today's society, all women are victims of an oppressive patriarchal system that must be fought against.
This whole accusing people of not being real feminists kind of reminds me of the no true Scotsman's fallacy, where you have these born-again Christians accusing Catholics of not being real Christians and moderate Muslims saying that the real Islam is all about peace.
This movement is all about telling women what is bad and shielding them from the so-called evils of the world. If any movement is turning women into victims, it's the current militant feminist movement in the West.
I am labeled an anti-feminist because I believe women can make their own choices regarding their sexuality and the use of their bodies. How ironic is that?
We decided to make this video as a response to the feminists here who are opposing the legalization of prostitution and militate against pornography and stripping.
But please keep in mind, we're not talking about sex slaves.
Or people being forced into the sex industry by third parties.
Or people dragged into it without their knowledge, like being unaware they are being videotaped during sex.
And we are not talking about child pornography.
Or bestiality.
But only about legal, consenting adults.
I know there is abuse going on in the porn industry. Some sex workers are forced to do things they didn't sign up for, or are pressured into taking drugs and they don't benefit from proper medical checkups. And I'm all for changing that and improving their work conditions, just like I am for improving work conditions in general. There are people in China working 16 hours a day in circumstances we would call inhumane. Does that mean that the sales industries are inherently bad? Because this is what this group of feminists seem to think about the sex industry.
To me, it doesn't make much sense to completely oppose an industry because it has problems that haven't been corrected yet. If that was the course we as a society were accustomed to taking, then no industry would exist. In fact, everything would have to be banned. We'd even have to ban peanut butter. Aside from the scores of people who are deathly allergic to peanuts, there have been outbreaks of salmonella caused by contaminated peanut butter, and yet we don't campaign against it simply because someone somewhere was harmed by it. We fix the problems to make the product safer. So why should the sex industry be any different? There's only one alternative, and that is prohibition, and that course of action has never succeeded.
One of the things these anti-porn feminists rely on the most to support their position is the suggestion that an increased availability of pornographic materials has a positive correlation with instances of rape and sexual violence. However, the evidence overwhelmingly negates this position, and in fact the opposite frequently holds true. For example, a 1996 study found that as the amount of pornography increased in 5 U.S. cities over the course of 10 years, instances of rape either declined or remained relatively stable. The exact same thing was found by an individual in Denmark who studied 4 separate countries over another 10-year period. It has also been conclusively proven that non-rapists in detention facilities use more pornography than rapists and child molesters. All this barely skims the surface of the available, reputable information on this topic.
The ones who oppose pornography often say that it's a sexist job that objectifies women especially. But what about the men? On average, the adult actress makes 2.5 times the amount a male performer will make. In fact, the pay rate is so pathetic for men that they often turn to gay-for-pay porn, which offers a far larger sum of money. Also keep in mind that men have a considerably harder time preparing for scenes, being that they have to maintain an erection and ejaculate on cue. Sometimes the man's face isn't even shown. So who exactly is being objectified here?
Another argument often used by those feminists is that being a sex worker is degrading. Many people would also consider scrubbing toilets degrading. The fact is, some people would rather fuck other people or take their clothes off for money than do another job. There will always be some jobs that some of us will never do. And there will also always be people willing to do those jobs. And even if at the time those sex workers are not that happy in their job, They'd still prefer to take it rather than other work that might require longer hours and shittier pay.
The war on prostitution is just like the war on drugs and ultimately doomed for failure, because here you have willing sellers and willing buyers, and as long as you have those two elements, you can't shut a market down. So here, keeping it illegal, we have billions and billions of dollars ultimately wasted that governments could take advantage on by taxing them. Now, prostitution is arguably one of the oldest professions around, and people who try and ban it, some of the oldest attempts to control people's sexuality. This has absolutely no place in a free society because it violates each individual's rights, some of their most basic rights, to do what they want, when they want it, with their own bodies. And people need to keep in mind, prostitution's not going anywhere anytime soon, whether it's legal or not.
It all comes down to choices. Choices a person can make and choices a person should be able to make. This is my body. This is the only thing I alone am ever going to truly own, and I should be able to use my body as I see fit, regardless of whether you or anyone else finds it morally or ethically wrong. The right to choose what happens to one's body and the right to control what happens to one's body is a fundamental right that I and others are extremely passionate about. The moment we say no, you can't do this to your body is the moment we step foot on a slippery slope that ends up with people, not just women, men included, being denied their most basic right, the right to body autonomy.
The anti-porn feminists claim that pornography has a negative impact on women, couples, and on society in general. However, there is no conclusive data or statistics proving this.
And while it may be true that consuming too much porn can have a negative impact on you, so is consuming too much sugar. Abuse, as a general rule, has bad consequences.
They say that being a sex worker is damaging to your body. Well, yeah, I mean, maybe in some cases, some extreme cases it is. But so is being an athlete. I mean, my cousin plays soccer. She's 3 years younger than me. She's already wrecked both her knees. But she loves her job. Yeah, you got coal miners, firefighters, police officers. It goes to show you some people actually do risk their bodies and their health to perform a job.
There is also the claim that pornography inspires or glorifies violence against women, and that male viewers will treat women like objects as a result, which is just as ridiculous as saying that people who watch boxing will go out and start beating the hell out of each other, or that kids who listen to death metal will shoot up their schools. It's just a scare tactic.
And while most of them deny that they actually want porn banned, they scream victory when banning does happen, such as the recent ban of stripping in Iceland.
But that's because they're not just against exploitation, they're against the actual transmission of money for sex. But then where is it that we draw the line? Do we draw it at the girlfriend who refuses to get married to her boyfriend unless he gives her a nice big diamond ring? Or the housewife who refuses to, have sex with her husband unless he takes her out for a nice dinner or a night on the town?
Instead of trying to redefine what feminism is about, maybe you need to consider the fact that you are the one militating against women's rights.
Do you really think that women are incapable of making their own decisions without some organization telling them what they should or should not do?
Because if you don't believe that, you may want to stop opposing the industries they choose to be part of, and instead militate for better working conditions and legal protection for them.
With prostitution being illegal, do you know what happens when the sex workers are raped, beaten up, or robbed? Nothing. They benefit from zero legal protection as there are no laws to regulate the work field.
You may want to consider for a moment, too, that a woman's sexual liberation shouldn't be about a group of people telling her when she can and can't, and under what circumstances, have sex.
We have a right to choose what happens to our bodies, and we will not accept you forcing your skewed morals onto us. We are not the victims here.
If the idea of sex for money seems morally repugnant to you, then you may need to come to terms with the fact that this is just your own personal bias, and in no way constitutes grounds for prohibiting consensual sexual acts.
Please post a comment or a video response sharing your thoughts on the legalization of prostitution, pornography or stripping. Also, if you enjoyed this video, check out the video responses all the other ladies in this collaboration made, which are gonna be linked around here somewhere. And thumbs up if you support our message. Until next time, stay safe.